Hey guys, welcome back to Wentworth Life and welcome to the very first Prisoner Cell Block H episode review. Now, as promised, I am going to be reviewing all 692 episodes of Prisoner. Now, new episode reviews will be dropping on the weekend on this channel, so if you're both a Wentworth and Prisoner fan, then I really hope that you start enjoying these video series. If it wasn't for Prisoner, there would never have been Wentworth. So let's pay some homage to the original Australian prison drama, starting with episode 1. Now, I have decided to name each episode with a title, and guys, these are not official episode titles whatsoever. These are just my own little spin titles, so don't read too much into it. But for me now, let's get started, and it's Prisoner episode 1, Welcome to Wentworth. So the episode begins with 3 women, all going about their day-to-day things, when all of a sudden a gate slams over them, followed by their mugshots. We have Karen Travis, Lynn Warner, and Bea Smith. So let's quickly talk about Karen Travis. She's charged and found guilty of the murder of her husband, and she has received life in prison. We have Lynn Warner, who has been found guilty of kidnapping and attempted murder, and she is sentenced to 10 years in prison. Now, Karen and Lynn, they both appear at the start of this episode in the back of the paddy wagon on their way to Wentworth Detention Centre as new prisoners. Now, Lynn claims that she is innocent and that there's been a huge mistake, and this will play a massive part of Lynn's storyline going forward. As it stands, Lynn has been blamed of kidnapping a baby and burying it alive. Now, she apparently done this out of sheer spite after being sacked as the babysitter. Now, like I said, Lynn claims that she is 100% innocent. Karen, on the other hand, she does indeed kill her husband, as we see it in flashback moments. However, we do discover that her husband was abusive towards her, beaten her and so forth, and even forced her to have an abortion when she fell pregnant, which was totally against Karen's will. When Karen gets home after the abortion, she finds her husband in bed with another woman, causing Karen to just go completely over the edge, and she ends up killing her husband while he has a shower with a massive kitchen knife, and it's literally like a scene out of Psycho. Now, I don't think Karen told anyone about this abuse. However, when she is strip searched during her induction, cigarette burns are found all down her back, and Karen is then taken to see Dr. Greg Miller. And this is when we discover that Greg and Karen, they both knew each other at some stage in their lives, and apparently they were madly in love at one point. So what's the score there? Well, more on that later as episodes go on. Jumping back just a little bit, and there is a prisoner running through the prison being chased by 2 officers. What on earth is going on? Well, the prisoner running is called Sally Lee, and she's being chased by Vera Bennett and Meg Jackson due to them catching some drugs on her. Now, Sally, she ends up running into Frankie Doyle and falls over, and Frankie, she's actually the first character who speaks any words in this episode, saying, "She bumped into me." Now, Sally is locked away by herself until she tells the officers where she got the drugs, but it's a step too far for Sally, who ends up hanging herself, resulting in the very first death scene in Prisoner. Now, this actually happens when Meg is taking newcomer Karen Travis into the cell, which of course absolutely horrifies Karen on her first day in prison. Where and how Sally got these drugs remains a mystery for now. Let's talk about Bea Smith, shall we? Now, in Wentworth, we followed Bea going into prison for the very first time. In Prisoner, Bea has already been in prison for 10 years, and she is already established as the top dog who the women follow and sometimes fear if they do disobey Bea. For example, Lynn Warner comes into the laundry, and when she introduces herself to Bea, Lizzie, and Doreen, they instantly take a dislike into her because they obviously know what she did about burying that baby alive, and they say that she's gonna pay for what she did to that little baby, and later on, she does pay for it because Bea, she ends up calling Lynn over to the steam press to show how to use it. So Bea shows her what to do and she tells Lynn to then have a go. When Lynn puts her hand in to get rid of any wrinkles, Bea then pulls down the steam press down onto Lynn's hand, and Lynn then runs off crying, and she even ends up lagging to the officers and to the governor, which I think Lynn will be sorry for because Bea is supposed to be getting her parole very soon, but more on that a little bit later. So let's quickly talk about some of the other characters. We've got Marilyn Mason, who is in prison for soliciting on the streets, I believe. Now, she actually ends up getting romantically involved with Wentworth's electrician called Eddie. Now, when Eddie comes to Wentworth to fix some dodgy wiring, Marilyn takes an instant fancy, and by the end of the episode, Marilyn and Eddie, they end up in the attic getting frisky. We have Lizzie Birdsworth, who is definitely a comic character from the word go. Now, I don't think Lizzie is on any particular side when Prisoner first starts. I mean, Lizzie, she seems to get on very well with just about anyone, including Bea, but she also gets involved with Frankie from time to time, particularly in these early episodes. Now, Frankie and Bea absolutely hate each other in Prisoner. Frankie wants to be top dog and makes no secret of it, but has never challenged Bea yet. While we're on the subject of Frankie, we learn that Frankie has a dangerous flash temper, and when things don't go her way, she goes crazy, because there is a moment in this episode where Vera Bennett tells Doreen that she is moving cells away from Frankie. Now, Frankie tells Vera that she can't move Doreen away from her, but Vera turns around and says they can do anything they want. Now, Frankie, she starts to like physically shake, and you can see the whole mood in the room change instantly. Frankie is trying to hold the temper as best as she can, and she then tells everyone to get out and leave, and as soon as they do leave, Frankie, she goes nuts. She ends up smashing the whole of the rec room to pieces and is then sent to the pound. It's also Frankie who ends up giving Vera the nickname Vinegar Tits in this first episode, which is absolutely hilarious, and she ends up putting the blame onto Bea for this nickname, sending Vera totally nuts and over the edge. Now, Vera, she is a extremely strict officer from the get-go, and she can even be cruel at times, and she's got no problems locking you up in the pound and leaving you there. So yeah, Vera is pretty much like the nasty officer when Prisoner begins, but she isn't like Joan Ferguson, who obviously goes around bashing and killing people. Vera is just extremely strict and cruel, but not a psycho. Erica Davidson is the governor, a very strict and stern governor, but she is fair on the women. When she needs to be tough, oh boy, she can be tough. She also has a very sharp tongue and manages to get her point across very directly from time to time. But she definitely does have the best interests for the women. Meg Jackson is an officer in Prisoner, and she is married to prison psych Bill Jackson, and they have a son called Marty. Now, Meg is definitely the more sympathetic officer in the prison, definitely the officer that you would want to go to if you needed any help. Mary Brooks, aka Mum. Now, Mary Brooks is an inmate who has been in prison for 15 years, and everyone pretty much refers to her as Mum. Even most of the officers and even the governor call her Mum. Now, Mum is in prison for killing her husband and is also looking at getting parole soon with Bea. Which brings me on to that little problem with Lynn's hand in the steam press. So Lynn, she has lagged, and it's now looking like that Bea is not going to get her parole. So Bea pays off an officer, Officer Yates, to open her cell door in the middle of the night and to leave the gates and the door open to Lynn Warner's cell. And when Bea gets to Lynn's cell, Bea ends up grabbing her, putting her hand over her mouth and tells her to shut up. And end of the episode cliffhanger. Now, the similarities in this scene where Bea is let out in the night reminds me of the moment in season 4 of Wentworth where Miss Miles takes Bea to see Joan. It's just so similar, I love it. Anyway, sticking with Prisoner, I forgot to mention that Frankie has the hots for Karen Travis, which totally freaks Karen out, and pretty much, Karen ends up calling Frankie disgusting and an animal. Now, Bear in mind, guys, this was in 1979, so homosexuality was frowned upon a lot more back then than these days. In fact, I honestly think that watching Prisoner when I was quite young was probably the first time where I was introduced to a gay character on the screen. Just proves how groundbreaking that Prisoner was back in the day. Now, something that I'm going to finish on is Lynn Warner, who she ends up going to Miss Davidson's office because she has arranged to make a phone call to this gardener called Larry. So basically, Lynn, she used to be a babysitter for this posh family called the Bentleys, and it was their baby that Lynn had apparently kidnapped. Now, the Bentleys had a gardener called Larry, who Lynn thinks could back up her innocence. So when Erica Davidson rings the Bentleys' house on Lynn's behalf, the mother, Mrs. Bentley, she tells Erica that Larry left the property over a month ago. She has no idea where he has gone. But as Mrs. Bentley is telling Erica this, we see Larry still working in the garden. So Mrs. Bentley is lying. Why? Well, all will be revealed. Well, summing up Prisoner's first ever episode, I would literally call it crazy, insane, a little bit scary at times, and it leaves me wanting more. Now, I've watched Prisoner Cell Block Cage loads of times over the years, so I know what's to come. However, I can often always remember how I felt when I first saw episodes and moments in any TV show, so I'm channeling my inner memory and feelings of my first impressions of Prisoner. I'm such a freak. God, I am Joe Ferguson. Anyway, that is the end of my first Prisoner review. So guys, let me know in the comments box below, what are your first impressions of Prisoner? Have you ever seen Prisoner before, or do you plan to one day? Let me know all of your thoughts and opinions in the comments box below. Okay, well, thank you all for watching today's video. Make sure you smash that subscribe button, stay safe out there, and I'll see you all again very soon.